we need to clarify a halacha, which I'm not so sure people are very familiar with it. We all know the great importance of baking Hallot for Shabbat, and when people make an effort to do the mitzvah of Afrashat Challah in their homes, and they want to bake in the ovens at home, Hallot for Shabbat, it can sometimes create a problem, and I'll explain myself. The Gemara says, the Talmud brings in spot in Shulchan Aruch, that you're not allowed to bake meaty bread or milky bread. That means bread which will contain milk or bread which will contain meat is an issue to bake unless you do it in a different shape that it's recognizable that this is meaty bread or milky bread, or you do a very small quantity that you will finish within a meal. Otherwise, one should not bake bread in quantities, means more than for a meal, and then with meat or milk, because bread is normally something which is eaten with either. And therefore there's a worry that a person will forget that the bread is meaty, or he'll forget the bread is milky, and we'll have it with the opposite. So because of that, the rabbis said that unless you're going to make it in a different shape, in a different form, or you're going to make a very small quantity, you should not be doing it with meat and milk. Now, when a person comes to bake Hallot for Shabbat, so obviously we don't have normally an oven dedicated specially to baking Hallot. So we'll either do it in a milky oven or in a meaty oven. But this creates a problem. Our meaty or milky ovens, which are separate, are not necessarily clean. There's a lot of residue. We know that you're not allowed to cook meaty food in a milky oven, milky food in a meaty oven, and it will make the food forbidden to eat if you do so, unless the oven was kashered in between. So, if you're coming to bake Hallot, let's take, for example, you have used your oven for cooking chicken, cooking meat. The steam builds up residue at the top of the oven. So what's going to happen when you bake your Hallot now? You might have residue coming onto the Hallot, and therefore that will create a problem of changing the status of a challah from a parav challah into a meaty challah. And we go back to the issue of not having meaty bread unless you do small quantities of different shapes. So therefore, what a person must do if he wants to bake Hallot, Erev Shabbat, and wants to bake Hallot, we're not concerned about what the oven has absorbed. We are concerned about residue. If the oven is dirty, that's what our worry is. So therefore, what a person should give a wipe, a good wipe to the ceiling of the oven, and make sure the oven is clean. You don't have to kasher the oven before you bake your Hallot. Just give it a proper wipe before you turn it on to bake your Hallot. And then the Hallot will be considered parav as you've cleaned the oven before. No need for kashering process, but just make sure it's clean. If you will not clean it, then you will not, first of all, you will not be able to have the Hallot with milk, that's for sure. But it might even create a problem that you might not be able to have the Hallot at all, as they're considered meaty Hallot. So people should be particular. If you're doing it in a milky oven and the meaty oven, wipe and clean the oven as much as you could so that you can bake. You don't have to go through a kashering process. Just make sure there's no residue on the oven before you bake your Hallot.